Everybody, welcome to tonight's audit committee. Welcome to viewers on YouTube, and I hope we'll have a very successful and enjoyable meeting. It's quite a big agenda tonight, and in a minute I'll try and break down some of the agenda so we roughly know what the focus will be on in the meeting. General housekeeping rules. We'll go to questions in the order that the hands appear. But before we start, I want to say a few hellos and a few thank yous. So we've got some special guest stars in tonight. We've got obviously Peter Legg has joined us, David Slater, welcome to you guys. The Chief, obviously Steve's here, Alan, Mark, and Liz as well. Great to see you all. Thank you for coming tonight. And also a big thank you to Councillor Rick Scott, who's subbing for Councillor Roberts. So thank you to yourself, Councillor Scott. And I don't believe I've missed anybody out. Obviously, a big hello as well to the team at our external auditor, Nicola and Nick. Welcome. So what I plan to do tonight, because it's such a big agenda, is to break it down into certain sections. And as we go into each item, I'll roughly say how long I feel we should use for a small brief summary from the officers, and how much time we'll allocate to questions from the members. And that should roughly allow us to put the focus in all the right areas and roughly finish as close as possible to 8 o'clock. The reason I've said all that is I didn't want anyone to feel that we were being rude if we pushed the agenda through and at a certain pace. That's the opposite to what we want to do. It's just the sheer amount of information in here. So without further ado, we'll get cracking. Agenda item 1, do we have any declarations of interest at all? No, can't see any hands, brilliant. Agenda item 2, minutes of the last meeting held on the 25th of March. Do we take them to be a true and correct record? Yep. I think we're okay there. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, team. Agenda item 3, audit follow-up business support. Now, Peter and David, Alan will be familiar with this, but yourselves may not. As an audit committee, what we try and do is pick up some of the slack from the audit team after they've done an audit and try and make sure or ensure rather that any priority 2s and 3s have been picked up and so on. So it's a good way for us to work closely together with the management team of each service. So in reference to what I said earlier in terms of the time slots, if this is okay for you, and I feel really mean doing this to you, if we could say have 5 minutes for a small summary of what you've done, and I know 5 minutes is very cruel, but if you could do that, that would then allow us to have around 15 minutes to ask you relevant questions and so on. So Peter, David, over to you.
Shall I kick off, David? Clearly the audit that was done on the business support team within economic development was sort of late 2019, October 2019, and clearly things changed quite rapidly as we got into 2020. So I think whilst I certainly don't want to use pandemic as any kind of an excuse, I think where David's team, relatively small team, that looks after various managed workspace, deals with a lot of varied business inquiries, runs a kind of an online service as well called blackpoolunlimited.com, and deals with a lot of businesses who have got a whole range of complex issues around where they locate and growth, seeking finance. The team have certainly since sort of February, March time of 2020 have been very sort of integral to the design and delivery of grant programs, which we are still, COVID-related grant programs, which we are still delivering today. And I think that has kind of, along with various other departments, has kind of swamped the team throughout the last year. So I think some of the recommendations have progressed during this period of time. Others have had to be put on hold. Others are actually having to rethink of not only the type of business support that we will deliver in the future, but also the way that we deliver it, because digital has kind of impacted on a whole range of services. Some actually more efficient by doing this kind of a lot of the events and sort of face-to-face advice that we were used to doing has been completely changed and turned on its head. That's not only on business support, but also on employment advice. And there's been a lot of more virtual face-to-face delivery. And obviously the events related activity that we do, like the Enterprise Week, which has been very successful in the past, has been cancelled. So I think there's kind of a number of areas that have been impacted in terms of planning. Some of the positive things that have happened, certainly Blackpool Limited, we've literally just soft launched the revamped website. David might want to say a little bit more. That's been pretty invaluable to have a kind of a web portal for us to be able to front some of our grant schemes. We've had thousands and thousands of inquiries from businesses over the last year that we've had to deal with. We've been administering and appraising grant applications. We've had literally 1,000 applications literally within the last few weeks that we've been appraising. These are not automatic, they're kind of discretionary. So the whole team ends up getting devoted to that. So that having had that sort of web presence and that communication we've developed over a number of years has been invaluable for us. Excuse me, somebody leaving outside. Some of the areas that have certainly suffered and have been, certainly the business startup service has suffered, and but remarkably, one of the good areas has been the occupancy levels of businesses within our managed workspace. We've got the Enterprise Centre down in South Shore, we've got the relatively small facility FY Creatives on Church Street, and the occupancy levels have been in excess of 90%, and demand levels are increasing. So one of the main projects within here that has been recommended, for instance, was to do a full business case for any expansion of managed workspace. And we are in the process of doing so as part of a project called The Edge, which effectively is the redevelopment of Stanley buildings. And that is going through a Green Book business case process as we speak, which should be ready by November this year. I think that is challenging the team to think about the way in which we not only want to deliver workspace, the space, but actually the aligned business support that goes alongside that, because we can bring a range of different partners, including our own support, to bear to assist these companies that are looking to grow. So I'm quite happy to deal with any particular detailed inquiries on any of the recommendations in the agreed action plan, but it's whether or not David wants to add anything. David actually is the business growth manager and actually day-to-day manages that team.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Peter. You did brilliantly. That was literally within 5 minutes, so well done. David, do you want to just have a couple of minutes just to explain or add anything to what Peter's just taken us through?
Yeah. I think that what's happened, particularly since the audit occurred, are a couple of significant things. One is that the Edge was successful in getting through the first parts of the town deal process. And so that provides a real opportunity to refocus the team, as Peter has said, going forward. And of course, the COVID grants, which have occupied us, inundated us at one level throughout the whole year. But I think it's been really good from a team building point of view that we've done that. And we've also built good relationships with other parts of the council that we didn't know particularly well as part of that process. So licensing, business rates, those kind of people that we didn't know. And those relationships we will use as we go forward to develop some of the actions which relate to the internal audit later on, which is sort of having a more unified approach across the council to dealing with businesses. So I think what necessity has created some opportunities for us in that regard. I think that the most important thing is going to be that if we're going to get the Edge, this fantastic new facility for small businesses in the town centre, we've got to support it in the right ways. So it is right that we focus the team around making that the best it possibly can be for Blackpool. And that's what we'll be doing, using this as a framework to guide some of that activity.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. That was excellent. You did really well. I feel so mean giving you so little time, but I appreciate why, and you used it wisely and well. Thank you both. Do we have any questions for Peter and David? Councillor Burgess?
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. The first question on page 15 or 18, depending on what you're looking at, is a question for David. And it's really, really exciting, the way that kind of the whole kind of work environment is changing for everybody, in this approach to business support is changing, and this development of the Edge is really great news, I'm sure, for a lot of small business people who are changing the way they work and having to look at different ways of working. But I wonder, how will the sectors with the most growth potential be identified? Because you said, like, the strategic objectives need a link to resources, and they have to show the greater perceived growth potential. So I'm just curious about how inclusive that would be when you look at the smaller operators. So that's question one. And then the second question is on R2. How will R2 incorporate the large informal sector that exists in Blackpool? So yeah, we're looking at the inclusivity there. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Burgess. David, do you want to take those, or Peter?
Yep, sure. I can certainly start with those. So in terms of the sectors, the work we've just having done at the moment as part of the Green Book business case for the Edge includes sort of an independent assessment of the startup market in Blackpool by Capita for us. And they have identified the sectors which have been growing in Blackpool. And it happens that those sectors match the kind of tenants that we've got in the building. I haven't actually got the list immediately in front of me on that at the moment. But I think that in the building, you know, and within the service, we have to strike a balance between looking to support the businesses that are going to grow and employ more people, which I think is an important part of what we do. But we have always provided a service to those who want to be self-employed rather than actually having employment. And we will strike a balance to make sure that we cover both those areas. But I think we have to be, for the sake of the building and in a way for Blackpool, slightly opportunistic in looking for the sectors that emerge, maybe by working with the college more closely, to seize the opportunities that are there to take things forward. Because I think there's an element of market making in those areas myself. Is that okay?
Yeah, I believe there was a second question about the informal economy as well, David.
Yes, we would look to include all aspects of business in the programme that we're talking about, and indeed we are looking to some of the more informal economy in some of the external consultations that we're doing on the Edge in conjunction with in the infusion service. So we would expect to include them in the research proposal as well. Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Do we have any more questions at all? Councillor Critchley.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's just about the large number of recommendations. Whilst I commend the team and everything that you've done behind the scenes, because getting your head around all them small business grants and everything else must have been astronomical. So I understand how hard it's been, and I understand that the delays have been there as well. But I'm just wondering, how will you amend these recommendations and the lesson to include the lessons learned? And if they're behind now, how can we still deliver them? And are there any other barriers to delivering the services, as in resilience workers behind the scene, burnout from workers? How do we get to take this forward now and still concentrate on those recommendations? Thanks, Chair. Sorry, can I just add one more onto that? It's just out of all the recommendations, which ones will you take forward? And have there been any new innovations that you've sort of stumbled upon, if you like, during this pandemic that you could take forward as well? Thanks, Chair.
If I'm David, if I maybe take one of the first questions through you, Chair. I mean, I think we've learned so many lessons this last year. And I think the one thing that really has hit home to me is when businesses are in distress and when they face the level of, fairly catastrophic situation, particularly in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector in this last year, they've needed somewhere to come to. They've needed somebody to help them. And even if we haven't always had the advice there at that point of moment, there's been a team there that's been able to who can navigate through the council, through other organisations, and can try and help them through the process. It isn't going to solve all of the issues. It certainly hasn't solved all the issues, but at least we've been able to try and explain, particularly with the grants, particularly with the financial assistance, and there's a whole raft of financial assistance that has not been administered by the council. A lot of it has through grants. There's been lots of other things like loans and VAT deferrals and rate relief and a whole host of things, a whole host of questions which have challenged the business community in this last year. And they've had a team that they can go to in Blackpool Unlimited. So I think that's the one. It's not an innovation. I think what it's done is it's just reinforced the need for having that sort of centralised team that is able to assist those businesses that are in effect have been struggling to survive and still struggling to survive, trying to come out of this with a business that is still running. I think we without having the sort of mechanisms that we've had in place, the communication channels we've had in place, we would have really struggled as a council to be able to deal with that. And so we do need to absolutely learn the lessons from that. And actually, David has made a very good point there about other services can contribute to this. There's a lot of other business support and advice. Trading standards is one that has been and will prove crucial as we sort of come out of this pandemic. That's been really good to work with those teams. We've never had so many conversations with business rates in our lives. In the last year, I've been here for 15, 16 years, and we're almost part of the same team now, which has been fantastic. So in terms of, I mean, that certainly is an innovation. What is new nowadays, I think, particularly the ability to be able to do this. We've all kind of shifted in this digital direction. It doesn't work for everybody, and actually, we will at some point need to have those face-to-face events. But that thing where you can just bounce off each other is still crucial. We're not going to continue just doing this. We've felt at times that we've lacked a little bit of capacity within the team to be able to kind of cover, but that's been an issue right across the board for all of the services who've dealt with the issues that we've been dealing with. Whilst I don't feel like there's a burnout, I think there is this kind of this feeling that we need to plan this return to some form of not just normality, but also this kind of hybrid way of working in the future, so we can actually get that more integrated approach to continue going forward and as a business-friendly council.
Brilliant. David, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, perhaps just a couple of things. One is that in terms of how are we going to take this forward, I think there are a lot of recommendations, but a lot of them are linked. So by sorting out how we're going to deliver, for example, our business startup service, we answer several of the recommendations in this audit plan, and the same is true of growth and things like that. So I think that we take it forward because this is what we have to do to make the service work in the future. So I don't see it as particularly different in that respect. The other bit in terms of lessons learned, that there's been one area that we've been having to do, because obviously we've not been able to have face-to-face workshops, which were a big part of what we did before, is we've been creating some online videos. And I think that one thing, to be honest, that we've learned is that you don't have to have big flashy videos to be effective. Short videos that you can make for no cost at all, really, as long as they're well thought through and well delivered, can have a great impact. And certainly the other thing that we've discovered is that we don't particularly want to go into hour-long, 2-hour-long online workshops and things like that, because people don't listen for that long. So we've been doing shorter pieces, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and pieces like that, which we think work much better. And so that's something that we have learned positively by actually having to do things during this year.
Brilliant. Thanks, David.
Chair, can I just ask where we can see the videos? Can we see them anywhere?
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel available via blackpoolunlimited.com.
Thank you.
Bring Councillor Burgess in.
Thank you, Chair. I was just interested where they've said, just said that they identified or located lack of capacity in places, and I'm interested to hear how they plan to address that and when. So it's the where, how, and when for that question. Thank you, Chair.
David, do you want to answer that, or Peter?
I will try, Chair. I think clearly the resources we have, core funding from the council, are obviously very welcome, and but actually we need to build on that. I think this is where the capacity, we will be needing to develop some capacity to be able to, for instance, administer the Edge, if that is, fingers crossed, approved later on in the year. Because beyond the capital project, we will need a team capable of maintaining a number of facilities, really. We're doing the business plan at the moment, so we're hoping that the revenue streams will enable us to generate some more staff. We will see some staff changes as well, which gives us an opportunity to look at the team. We've only got 2, in effect, qualified business advisors, one of which is retiring shortly. So there's an opportunity there for us to look again. But that, obviously, we need to make the best use of the relatively small team that we've got. There are external funding opportunities that will arise. Not just the Edge is a capital scheme, it's not a revenue scheme, but certainly at the time when we need it, there will be other post-European funds, shared prosperity funds, which we will look to, so we could match some of our kind of core council resource for some of those resources. Then we may be able to expand the team that way to, and it's not always about having more people employed by the council. Sometimes it's making sure that the work that we do with universities, with college, with other business support organisations who themselves are drawing in the support, is making sure that it's targeted on Blackpool businesses who need it. We're constantly banging on the door about the needs of Blackpool businesses and asking Growth Lancashire and others, whether they are actually, providing the right kind of support for, and are they getting the right kind of inquiries coming through from our local businesses. So yes, we'd love more money, and we would love a bigger team. But I think actually we've got a good starting point, and we need to make the most of it and explore all other opportunities. Clearly, on the other side of the team that kind of works to me on employment support, we're doing a huge range of stuff about helping businesses with their recruitment needs, with trying to get young kids into their first work placements. So support for businesses is not just about business planning and finance and marketing and workspace. It is actually about the skills support and the recruitment challenges that a number of our businesses are asking for our advice and support in.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter. Are you okay with that, Councillor Burgess? Jill, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for Peter, really, and maybe even for Tracy, who's here tonight as well. So Peter, you did allude to at the start that this audit was from late 2019, and the world is very different that you're working in now. Is there any mileage in having a conversation with the internal audit team about some of those recommendations and agreed actions that perhaps now are non-applicable, obsolete, or would just actually benefit from a comprehensive review or amendment?
Tracy, do you want to come in as well? Sorry, Peter.
Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to see if Tracy want to come in first or yourself, Peter. Peter, do you want to go? Yeah, Peter, go first, then Tracy can come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and Councillor Brown. I think it would be helpful if we were to perhaps, there's an awful lot of recommendations here. Some of them are a little bit related to each other. I think we could probably condense them in some way, and then actually looking in. I personally feel that there might need to be some form of a follow-up audit later on in the year, because some of this feels a little bit irrelevant now, actually, and we have definitely moved on. I feel that we would be in a much stronger position around economic intelligence and where we are. If we don't get the edge, for instance, what are we going to do as a business support service? It's going to mean that we will have a challenge to still continue to do the things that we want to try and do. So I do think it would be helpful if I could work with Tracy maybe to plan a follow-up audit maybe later. Sort of make sure that not only are these things been done that we said we would do, but actually they are in the current context really of the challenges that we're facing.
Thanks, Peter. Tracy?
Yeah, I really just concur with Peter's view there. I think the work of the business support team very much links into the wider recovery framework which the council is putting in place, so that we can see how we look post-pandemic. So absolutely, I'll link in with Peter at the appropriate moment, just so we can refocus those recommendations to reflect what we've learned during this last 12 months, because I think it's really important to do so. And business support is going to continue to be a really important service over the coming months whilst we get Blackpool back.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. And thank you, Jill, as well. It's an excellent point. As you were all discussing this, I was trying to work out in my own mind, which direction should this go? Should it stay within audit? Is there a potential for a scrutiny? But clearly not yet, because you guys are going to be beyond busy, I imagine, and will be for some time. So it's working out what framework we can use to support you. I would say use Tracy's team to follow up on this particular piece of work, and potentially in the future liaise with Councillor Mitchell when you feel the time is right for potentially scrutiny to support some of the work you want to do in the future, but probably not at this moment in time, but sometime I would say on the horizon it could potentially be considered. Is my thoughts. So that should hopefully catch everything and allow you guys to get the support that you need in terms of planning, resources and whatnot. Do we have any further questions at all for Peter and David? No? Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. We did a lot and we're only 5 minutes over, so that's pretty impressive. Well done, everyone. Well done. I could spend all night talking to you both, Peter and David. So the only thing I would say is, just on behalf of all the elected members, is just a huge thank you for all the work that you and the team have done over this last difficult, horrible 13, 14 months in keeping so many businesses heads above the water collectively as a town. We owe you a huge amount. So it's just a first chance we've had, I think, as collectively to say thank you. So thank you on behalf of us all for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you guys are free to go if you wish, and we'll then move on to the next agenda item. Thank you. So we'll let Peter and David go and we'll move on to agenda item 4. Right, team, this is a huge agenda item. And if we got carried away, we could be here till midnight as we work our way through this. So we're going to have to be quite disciplined in the way that we approach it. So it's broken down into public health, director of adult services, head of organisational workforce development, public health testing, and audit and risk. So we've got to review all of this in the space of 50 minutes, an hour. So what I'm going to suggest is if we try and keep the intro as brief as we possibly can, and that would say a couple of minutes. I feel really mean in saying that, and then that leaves us at least 8 to 10 minutes for some kind of good question and answer focused approach in terms of what can follow that. So no pressure, Liz, because you're up first as representing Arif on public health. So if you could just give us a very brief appraisal and then we can go into questions.
Yeah, so just briefly, because there's quite a lot of content in the report. I mean, we've been meeting with national partners, local partners, policymakers, decision makers throughout the pandemic from the very early days, and are still very much embroiled in those conversations and decisions now. Arif has regular meetings and has done throughout with the Chief Medical Officer, with the Associate Directors of Public Health, who are key players in terms of cascading information, but also trying to influence policy and decisions at that national level. And it's been plethora of meetings and decision-making forums at a national, regional and local level. And obviously the Lancashire Resilience Forum has been a key partner in terms of that emergency response for Lancashire, which includes Blackpool. At a more local level, I think it's fair to say that we reacted really quickly in terms of the pandemic and how it would and has impacted on Blackpool. We've worked very closely with our partners, including our NHS colleagues, council and beyond. And we've done all that we can in terms of increasing our capacity and resource to deal with that pandemic and really prioritise protecting and supporting our communities through this. We've managed to bring in extra expertise in health protection in order to help us do that. And we've always grabbed every opportunity we can to do more in Blackpool. So when we were able to test more and undertake more testing as directed by the Director of Public Health and others locally, we did. So we were one of the first areas to pilot the community testing, and that continues at the moment. And we were one of the first local authority areas to take on the local zero contact tracing from the national team, and we continue to do that in a pilot phase at the moment. And that has really helped us to know exactly what's going on, to deal with any incidents or outbreaks really quickly, and as I said, support our communities through this really quite terrible time, really. We have much better data now, so we're able to see what's going on in terms of positive cases, and we, as I say, we have local zero, so we're able to contact people directly to see where they've been, what they did, where they possibly got their infection, and deal with any contacts to make sure that they get all the support that they can to isolate. And although we're at very low levels of positivity at the moment, that work needs to continue. There are still lots of concerns out there in terms of variants of concern, in terms of international travel, so it's not gone away. We will continue to work in partnership nationally, regionally and locally, and do all that we can to keep Blackpool safe throughout this. So I'll say no more because you need me to be brief.
You did excellently. Thank you, Liz. Thank you. So I know there are some issues with following the agendas tonight. So this is the testing element of public health, which is page 29. Sorry, Liz. Yeah. So do we have any questions for Liz on this element of the risk register at all? Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Chair. The question is twofold. What is the biggest challenge you currently face, and what has been the impacts both physically and mentally on the team?
Good questions. The biggest challenge at the moment seems to be getting timely and accurate data in terms of obviously the national push at the moment in terms of testing is for people to pick up their own kits and to test at home, which is fine because it makes testing more regularly available to people, but we need that data and intelligence to be fed back to us in terms of what the results are. So we need people to register their test results, to do the tests accurately, to register their results, and then we get that information as to whether they're testing positive, negative, or their void tests. Otherwise, we're a bit in the dark as to what's going on. So that's our biggest challenge, I guess, at the moment, in terms of we want to make sure that people are testing as regularly as possible. So we recommend twice weekly for these self-tests at home, but we need the data and intelligence to work on in terms of any positive cases that are out there. So that's it's a sort of data intelligence thing. And I guess we've gone through a journey in public health, as has the pandemic, in terms of feeling very pressured, feeling slightly overwhelmed by it all, and it being out of our control, to being much more in control, supporting each other, got that extra capacity that we needed in terms of health protection experience. We've used the welcome contributions of the wider council and partners in terms of helping with the pandemic response. I mean, it's been a council and Blackpool response, really, not just public health. So I think we're at that stage where it's gone quieter in terms of positive cases. So we're having a bit of a lull and being able to take some time out, but we know that it's not over, and we're all supporting each other through that in terms of the next stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Collett?
Thanks, Chair. Just a follow-up question on that theme. Do we have, or do you feel that we have a robust plan to deal with the data kind of problems? Because for Blackpool, that might be what does us, really, because the world is getting back to normal. So or slowly everything is calming down. So the threat is that people start taking their foot off the gas.
Yeah.
But we're a seasonal holiday town in a country where people can't go anywhere. So if that happens and we get a variant, but people no longer think things like that are important, and they start taking their foot off the gas about registering their tests, so on and so forth, that could be very, very dangerous for a town like us. So I was just wondering, what's the plan?
Yeah, I mean, sorry. Yeah, sorry. We've used our communications team to constantly put messages out, to engage our communities, using our voluntary community sector colleagues to say, continue to test, continue to play by the rules, continue to make sure that you isolate if you do have symptoms or you do test positive. And make sure that it's the hand, space and face. This has not gone away, and we need to be careful. So it's using the comms, but also I think over the past year, we've used our partnerships really, really well. So we often get to hear about, so with our schools, for example, we have the Director of Public Health and others, Director of Children's Services, have regular online meetings with the head teachers, just as a question and answer session in terms of what's going on in their schools, what help and advice do they need to know, and Arif plays back, what's going on in terms of infection rates and so on. So it's that, and we have various forums that operate in that way, so that we have those communication channels open, and that way they trust us. They're engaged with us, and they often let us know very early if there's something going on. So if there's 1 or 2 cases in a school, we get notified, we can react to that, we can call them, we can investigate. And that's been the same with many of our workplaces, and with many of our with our NHS colleagues and our care homes. It's proactive and engaged conversations and communications, which means that we often know early, and we need to continue that. We can't always wait for the national data system to catch up, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Councillor Collett. Councillor Hugo, is there anything you wanted to come in on as regards the testing side?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I was wondering about the autumn and what plans we've got in place for when the demand for testing might increase again, when the autumn comes, and also whether the tests that we currently are using will need to change if the variants change.
Yep. So the latest advice that I have from Department of Health and Social Care is that the tests are suitable for picking up variants that we have at the moment. So that at the moment, the latest evidence says that they're fine for doing that, for that. But in terms of, we're pushing at the moment for an update on the national position for testing beyond the end of June. At the moment, we've only got a guarantee that free testing will be available, and test kits, etc., for us to use and distribute locally up till the end of June. So directors of public health are in active conversations with the decision makers in government as to what about after June? What do we do then? So we're pushing for that now.
Thank you, Councillor Hugo. Do we have any more questions for Liz at all? Councillor Mitchell. You're on mute, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I just wonder when it comes to the time where we consider lessons learned, will we be comparing notes with other local authorities to see what they've learned from the pandemic?
I think that's one of the key conversations that we have regularly with in our national and regional and local calls in terms of good practice, bad practice, learning, what we could do better. We've certainly been doing lots of reflecting at Blackpool Council and with wider partners across the Fylde Coast in terms of maximising our opportunities and learning from the experience. And I think it's okay to say that in conversation with ARIF, we're proposing to write a public health annual report for 2020-21 about the COVID pandemic so that we can capture what's gone on in Blackpool in terms of data intelligence, but also the impact on Blackpool, and collect some of those stories and learning, because there's always lots that we could improve on, but we feel that we've maximised our opportunities to protect our communities here.
Brilliant, thank you, Liz. Jill?
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a question that's specific for Liz, it's for all the risk owners and the risk managers really. And it's about, I was quite surprised there isn't more information on here in terms of the current position about how we're managing the mental and the physical resilience of all our council employees. And this isn't just because they contracted COVID, but due to the stress of just this whole year has had on so many facets of people's lives, and in particular for council employees that have been having to work so hard. So could we just have a bit of information about what are we doing to ensure that we do look after the mental and physical health of our employees?
Liz, do you want to take it from just the public health element?
Yeah, well, from our team and what information and advice support we get from the council HR, and there's always resources, support and messages in terms of checking in with staff in terms of their mental health and well-being. Regular Teams meetings, we can go out and meet people in a socially distanced way if they prefer to do that. And there are lots and lots of resources out there available locally and nationally, which are really good practice. But so it is that sort of check-in with people. I'm sure somebody else would give a much more comprehensive. I'm just talking from our team. It's that regular check-in. It's that using resources and help that's available, and being kind, isn't it, and respectful of people's positions under such pressure.
Yeah, I suppose I was looking for obviously all of that, but specifically, are there any sort of occupational health services that people can be referred straight into?
Yes. Yes, there are. When, for example, a member of staff has tested positive, has had very suffers from long COVID as a result, they would be referred to Occy Health, and there's a robust support in place for them in terms of a phased return to work, etc. Neil probably could say more. I don't.
Yeah, that's a beautiful link, Chief, across to your element, which is the adult services part of the risk register, which I believe you're going to cover. If you could address that question and also the item itself, that would be great, and obviously briefly as you can.
That was very pointed about the brief.
Not at all. That would be said to every officer, Chief.
Actually, that specific question around employee wellbeing is mentioned specifically within the HR bit. So the third section, which is page 28. Yeah. We have, as Liz just mentioned, our own occupational health team, which is an in-house team. So on top of our other our employee support programs, we have that occupational health team who can provide detailed and comprehensive support if for more intense need. Our managers also provide that first link in terms of ensuring that there is appropriate support depending on the nature of the service. So we've done risk assessments in each area depending on whether the services have had to still be frontline and still be customer facing, or whether their home working could create a different set of risks or a different set of pressures. So we've been staying on top of that as we've been going through the year, and also managing and monitoring things like sickness as well, to ensure that we have that information. Just to start off on the adult social care element, Karen Smith is on leave for a few days. I think she's actually having a jab, but Kate Aldridge is with us, who's been taking a lead on the vaccination programme within the council, also with our partners. But one of the things we've been doing there to make sure we keep our services in good order is there's daily contact made with all our residential care homes and regular contact made with all our care at home agencies as well, to ensure that we know what their pressures are, so whether there's infections in the home, whether there's any challenges in terms of staffing. Certainly early in the pandemic, staffing issues did occur on a fairly regular basis if employees had to isolate or if they were unwell. So we were able to plug gaps quickly by making that regular contact. One of the advantages of being a small place geographically is it's possible from the team within adult social care to contact all of those residential care providers where the risk is greatest. The approach we've taken with vaccines has actually led to us being, certainly at the figures I last saw about a week ago, the highest proportion of vaccinated residents and staff in the country. So Kate might be able to talk a little bit more about that in some detail. But that multidisciplinary approach within adult social care, so it is very much the adult team within Karen's area, but also with Aris team with Liz and colleagues, making sure that we do have that support network so we can answer questions on a regular basis. Very much an interactive session happens every fortnight, I think, with those providers, so they can ask questions, difficult ones and ones that concern them, and get the answers they need from the local experts in it. I'll just let Kate jump in if she wants to say about the vaccine programme that we've been undertaking in partnership with Health Service.
Yeah, so we started the vaccine programme with the hospital as one of the first sites to go live with vaccine availability in the town to target our health and social care staff. And they were really flexible in allowing us to essentially just book full days of their available vaccinators. And we worked with our providers directly to get those appointment times populated. So we worked with all of our internal staff groups to book appointments. And we also worked with all of our domiciliary and support providers to get them appointments up at the hospital. We also did some joint work with the trust to make sure that the team that were going around and supporting the vaccination of residents at care homes could also do staff, because I'm sure anybody who's worked closely with social care will know that it's really difficult to manage staff time away from the home. So getting them vaccinated in the home was a really good way of making sure that everybody had good access to the vaccination. They're well on now through that programme with the second doses of those vaccinations, and there are very few of our health and social care population who are not, kind of fully through their second vaccination. We've also worked really closely to understand any vaccine hesitancy in this group, and we've done some targeted work with the Director of Public Health and the Public Health team's support to understand how we might be able to resolve some of that hesitancy and support people to make the right decision for them, and ensure they're using the right information sources to determine how they balance the risk to them and their communities. So we've had fantastic take-up, we've had fantastic engagement from our providers in wanting to protect the service users that they support, and a brilliant response from the vast majority of the staff that are involved in that very difficult care and support work.
Thank you, Kate. Chief, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, just in terms of the HR side of things, then obviously from the very early stages we had the shielded list, so we were protecting those particular staff even more so. We've had, as Liz has already mentioned, a significant amount of testing available for staff, particularly those who had to be in the office or had to be at work when the infection rates were a lot higher. and we've been allowing people to take those kits home, as well as actually supporting them to do the tests in the workplace. The level of sickness is actually less last year than the year before. It actually has come down. It was 9.5 days per employee last year. So we've been keeping an eye on that in each area, and to see which, whether it's related to COVID or whether it was other reasons. There's a lot of support for managers. We already mentioned the comprehensive work, the occupational health work in place. We've also been moving staff around and redeploying, particularly with some services that have been closed, to support those services from other areas. I think we may have mentioned this last year, but a particularly notable one was we actually had a number of staff in leisure services trained to work in the crematorium when they were under particular pressure. So some quite unusual things, but we've moved people around just to support wherever had the pressure and wherever needed that additional support, and made sure people were appropriately trained to do so. Blackpool's performance overall in terms of positivity rates has been good throughout the pandemic. Currently, there is one member of staff off related to COVID, and that's actually because they're isolating because of a family member who has tested positive. But the amount of testing that we've been doing, testing in Blackpool is still about 30% higher than the average for the rest of the Northwest. And our positivity rate is one of the lowest in the Northwest as well. So we've had plenty of information about whether there is a danger or a risk. And the active work that Arif's done with his team alongside services has provided that assurance and guidance as much as possible throughout the pandemic, been very visible to do that. That's just, I suppose, a basic summary, and answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chief. Bring in Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to Neil there, my question really wasn't about, I know you pointed me to page 28, and it wasn't so much about those staff that have tested positive and what we've been doing to help them, where they could refer to. It was actually the whole of the staff and those people that have been fit and, if you like, unwell, and everybody who's been working really hard this year. You know, what's the offer to them? Are we having those conversations with them actively, proactively, and not just waiting for somebody to say, you know, I'm feeling a bit tired, feeling a bit stressed, etc. That's what I suppose I expected a little bit more information of. So I was just trying to clarify my point there. I'm not talking about those people who've been diagnosed or self-isolating or clinically vulnerable. It's the whole of the workforce. That's what my question was pointed at, just for clarity there.
Chief?
Yeah. The offer that we're talking about isn't just for those who may have been unwell, is actually for those who have been particularly stretched and busy. So the feedback there has come through management, through each service, as well as diagnosing any stresses that may be there based on, I mean, sickness rates and such obviously do give us an indication of areas where there may be pressure, particularly if it's non-code related. But yes, we have been supporting those areas that have been particularly busy. So that has been why, both in terms of using staff to support it, but also ensuring that we are listening, and I say not just waiting for people to talk to us, but actually actively engaging with service to see how they have been working through this last year, and not obviously just waiting for a survey to be done, but understanding each service individually, so they can feedback how they're coping within it. We've been using Tracy's team as well to give confidence to people about any nervousness about being in the workplace, about the pressures that they've got in terms of demand on their services. So the feedback is very much through management teams and the management structure, and we review that on a monthly basis at our extended CLT, where we actually are able to have that wider engagement. We also do it through our senior leadership team, which is it's about 50 of the operational heads and above, where we're able to have those conversations as well, so we can understand any pressure that they're seeing or feeling, and then address the concerns there, both whether that is to do with workloads or whether it's to do with concerns because of any vulnerability or risk the staff feel about what they're doing, or if it's things they're seeing with their clients that they work with, about pressures that we may not be able to see in the figures. So both looking at the numbers, but also trying to get that more qualitative feedback from staff as well.
Just one final question, if you don't mind. Are there services that staff can self-refer to? Do the council offer that facility to their staff so they don't have to go through the managers, in other words?
Yes, the our EPA service is a self-referral support service. So there's a number and a website which all staff are able to access any time they choose, and there's no limit on the amount of times they can access it either.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Chief. Do we have any other questions on the adult services element of the risk register? The only one from me, Chief, on this particular element is it's actually the flip side of this, in the same way that Jill was asking, actually, because of the demand on the adult services. Do the team have the resource capacity required to horizon scan non-COVID challenges that were there before and were on the horizon?
We've had additional resource, both financial, and therefore that's brought additional people in through some of the COVID funding that we've had nationally. So that's allowed us to put people into place whose job it is purely to deal with the pandemic. And that leaves those who are less focused on that. So when we're thinking about the economic recovery, for instance, you were looking at some of Alan's team, Nick Gerard, etc. Their work has not been COVID focused, except to the extent of economic recovery from the pandemic. So there are some services very much in the in the guts of the work around the pandemic, but others kept separate from that and able to focus on what happens next. And we've now developed a plan of the next year about that recovery. So that's both economic, it's service recovery. It's also about how we help communities recover. So we've chunked that up into a number of sections, which allows some of our management team to focus purely on what next and how we focus on other things, not just purely about managing the day-to-day business from the pandemic's perspective. So Anthony Lockley is the officer taking the lead on that, because his particular service area hasn't been one of those that has been very much in the guts of the pandemic. So yes, we have been able to do that just by strategically separating some people away from the day-to-day business and allowing them to focus on other things as well. I mean, for an example, it's Anthony and his team who are leading on our climate change work, very much looking at the long-term future rather than the day-to-day. And I've just been corrected on the initials for our employment support program. It's called EAP, and actually the family's employees can access it as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Chief. I know Kate wants to come in on this. Kate?
I was only just going to add a little bit around the adult services and just some reassurance, should it be needed, that our adult social care team in particular, they have had some resource that's been focused on supporting adults who have been directly impacted by the COVID crisis. Those people who've been clinically extremely vulnerable and are also open to social care, and reaching out and supporting those individuals and supporting providers to ensure that people in residential care and supported living accommodation are well supported. But they've also been meeting the needs of all of the other people who need social care, and some of whom who've become new to needing social care over the last year. So we've used that resource well that's come in through various different COVID grants to ensure that there's enough social work time, and we've continued to provide as much direct contact for social workers to be working with families and with older adults and adults with disabilities to make sure that their services and the direct engagement with the community has been maintained throughout this, with an eye on recovery and supporting them to re-participate and, return to things like day centres as they've become available, and maintaining that contact throughout.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Councillor Burdes?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a further question, just going back to adult services. I think both the Chief and Kate have both touched on this, but it's I'm interested to find out what opportunities now exist that they feel they may need more support with to unlock as we go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Briefly, if you could, Chief. That's under criticism, by the way, just the clerk.
No, it's fine. I think one of the things which the work has done over the last year has really improved the partnership working both with the health service, with our neighbouring councils, particularly our Lancashire County Council, and with our providers, because the relationship has been one of two-way mutual support. So we've needed them, they've needed us, and the relationships have really built. So understanding each other has really been a good thing. So actually, there's been a lot of real positive learning about those close supportive working relationships in this last year. And as Kate was talking about with the vaccine programme, very much hand in glove there to make sure we made the best use of the vaccine supply to get it to the people who needed it the most. So I think that's really where some of the real positive stuff which will help us going forward and where we can focus in service improvements next.
Thank you, Chief. Right, what we'll do is move on to the Head of Organisation and Workforce Development, which I believe, is that you, Steve? No? Who am I looking at? Have we crossed over to yours again there, Chief, or Mark?
I feel I may have been actually introducing and answering that question while I was talking about adult social care.
Yeah, we have had a crossover, so don't worry, don't worry. Is there anything else that you wanted to add into that, Chief?
No, I think most of the issues we actually raised during, in terms of the testing, the monitoring of sickness, that have been on top of any issues that were coming up through services, all very much covered in what we said so far already.
Brilliant, excellent. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for that. Do we have any questions for the Chief at all that we've not covered? Okay. So, sorry, Steve, about that. I was giving you another job there. It's not that you've not got much to do at the moment. Okay. Moving on to the final bit then of the risk register element, which is the Head of Audit and Risk. Tracy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is very much around lessons learned, as Liz referred to before, and making sure that we capture all that information, both at a local level in terms of what's happened in Blackpool, but also at a Lancashire level through the Lancashire Resilient Forum and indeed nationwide. And based on those debriefs and the planned audit of health protection arrangements, it's making sure that we identify areas where we could strengthen our major emergency plan going forward. We have, as a council, a major emergency plan in place, but it's very much focused on short-term incidents, a day, a week, a month, nothing that's been as prolonged as this. So it's making sure that we can accurately reflect what we have learned and what's worked well, due to the fact we've had a lot of practical people working tirelessly through the last 12 months to get us through the pandemic.
Thank you, Tracy. Do we have any questions for Tracy at all? Jill? I know you're long enough now, Jill, to know when you're ready to go.
Sorry, is it Jill? Sorry.
Jill, sorry, yeah, Jill.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite hear you there. Sorry, Chair. Sorry, it's just a final question for me for Liz, actually. Liz, obviously, you've been doing an awful lot of work in terms of getting the testing sites ready so that they're there. Now, our own population in Blackpool will know about those facilities, but we're going to get a lot of tourists coming into the town. How are you going to publicise that those facilities are available for them as well?
So we're planning some work at the moment with our hospitality sector in terms of visitors at hotels and engaging them, firstly, to make sure they test their staff regularly. But we're hoping that if they engage, that we'll be able to have test kits available for visitors to use when they're staying in those hotels too. At the moment, we've got a good supply of kits, so it's not an issue, at least till the end of June. So as I say, we're starting those conversations at the moment. The focus is about the staff, but we will be having those conversations about visitors too. And we have a community testing drop-in shop in the Hounds Hill at the moment, which is publicised through our website and social media, but that allows anyone to pop in and have a test. As I say, it is aimed at the workforce, but it is open to residents and visitors too, and that's branded up as you walk by. We have talked with comms about putting more signage and branding about in the town centre so that people are directed to it, but it's a fairly small shop facility, so we're trying to manage that, but it certainly is an open access at the moment, and we are going to continue that until at least the end of June. So yeah.
Well, it's good to hear that you've got some plans in there to publicise that for tourists. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick one following on from that to Liz again. Obviously, we can put leaflets out to hotels, etc. But what about the coach companies and Network Rail? You know, that will bring quite a lot of people into the resort. Have there been plans with the railway companies and the coach companies?
I'm not sure about the railway companies, although we have had colleagues from the station access our testing centres, community drop-in centres. So, but certainly in terms of the coach companies, Philip Welsh is deep in conversation with a number of those providers to ensure that they are COVID secure and encourage people. They would encourage people to test before they travel, because once you're on a coach full of people with one positive, it's not a scenario you want to be in. So yeah, it's about encouraging people to test before they get on that coach. Yeah, but Philip Welsh is doing a lot of that work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Critchley.
Thanks, Chair. So sorry, I don't want to prolong this, but do you know that when this is to Liz again, when you just said that we'll have testing kits till the end of June, that's a massive worry, that, isn't it? Because Blackpool's a tourist centre. We're just about to open for the summer. Is this a government thing that they might stop the testing kits? Or if they do stop the testing kits, will we be have to pay for them then? And then how does that impact on people who are working in health and social care who have to be tested, like myself, 2-3 times a week because we're working with vulnerable people?
Kate may know about the health and social care testing, but I assume that will continue. This is about the community testing and the self-testing kits that we've only got a contract, I guess, or formal agreement that they will continue to be provided till the end of June. As I say, directors of public health nationally are lobbying the government to make a decision about availability beyond that date, because yeah, we will need testing to go beyond that date. It's just a question of what that offer will be, I think. So we're looking for that clarity from the national government at the moment.
Chief, did you want to come in? Did I see an indication? Were you okay with that, Chief?
No, it was just purely, yes, it is a government contractual decision, but it isn't necessarily going to end in terms of that community testing. It's part of the roadmap plan, is that what are the constraints, what are the rules around reopening. There hasn't been clear decisions made about whether testing will be required to access certain things, so theatres, festivals, whatever. So until that's clear, they haven't stated anything further than the end of June about that mass community testing capacity being available. So we would expect during May to hear exactly what that plan is, and that is separate from managing vulnerable people. It's purely looking at that big contract around community testing.
Just to come in on the social care element, we are continuing to assume until we're told otherwise that testing is now a routine part of what is needed to supply services to vulnerable people. And as and when we are told that changes, because the level of risk is such that may no longer be required, that's when we'll look to make that change. But at the moment, we are anticipating that testing will be needed for quite some time into the future.
Thank you, Kate. Just before we go back to Tracy's report, is there anything else on testing that you wanted to ask, team, or you were comfortable with that? Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Back onto Tracy's report. Do we have any questions for Tracy at all? Tracy, we're not going to let you get off that lightly. So the only thing I would ask is, or add rather, is to follow up on Councillor Mitchell's earlier question that was asked of Liz, I believe, which was about will there be a lessons learned exercise of what worked and what didn't compared to other local authorities?
Absolutely, there will. We'll be looking at it at local Blackpool level. We'll be looking at it Lancashire-wide through the Lancashire Resilience Forum, which covers all the Lancashire authorities, and we'll also be learning from the national picture as well, so that we can draw on all that expertise and learning and experience of the last 12 to 13 months.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for that. Chief, sorry, apologies. Chief,
I won't drag it out, but it's purely the LRF work that we've been doing across Lancashire has actually meant we've been doing lessons learned all year. So we've been learning from each other. There's been some really good stuff happening in Lancaster, some really good stuff in other parts, and we've been borrowing from each other all the way through. But we will do a full roundup of it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Chief. I know it's been a slightly unusual way of approaching the risk register, but a lot of the items clearly link into each other, so hence why it's felt quite an abstract approach. I found it's worked. We seem to have covered everything. Is there anything that we've missed, everybody on the team, or are we comfortable with what we've asked and there's nothing that we've not asked? We're all okay. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, everyone. What we'll do is move on to the next agenda item, which is one for you, I believe, Tracy, which is the Risk Services Q4 report. If we could break it down into two halves, and if you could take us through pages 31 to 40, and then we'll take questions.
Of course, thank you, Chair. So this report presents a summary of the work completed by the Audit and Risk Service up to the end of March this year. Page 34 through to 36 provides some of the key areas of work that we've been involved with. A couple of areas to note is the ongoing support for the verification of business grants, both pre-assurance work and post-assurance work, so both before and after payment. I've incorporated details of the government's new National Risk Register, one to help the Audit Committee with horizon scanning going forward, but also to let the committee know that that's been looked at by the Lancashire Resilience Forum, so that we can assess the risk on a pan-Lancashire basis and look to where we may need to develop further emergency planning scenarios. The health and safety team continue to provide support throughout the council to ensure COVID secure arrangements are in place in the workplace for those staff who need to come in work. And we're also involved in the project that's looking at council service recovery and the potential new ways of working. Page 36 through to page 40 of the report lists the performance data, year-end position against all of the various targets. You will note that delivery of the audit plan was slightly less than what we would ordinarily achieve. It was 80%, where we normally achieve at least 90%. Given the work of the team and the support that they've been given throughout the pandemic, 80% is actually a really, really good figure in my mind, and certainly is ahead of what a number of other local government internal audit teams have been able to report. So I felt able to give my annual audit opinion, which I'll come on to later. The area which was a bit disappointing was the completion of service level risk registers by the end of the financial year. All services have a risk register in place, but some of those aren't up to date. We normally report a much higher figure. So we're going to be managing that through the risk management groups going forward to improve that over the next 3 months or so. And I'll pause at that stage to take questions before moving on to the rest of the report.
Thank you, Tracy. Do you have any questions for Tracy in this first half of the report? Jill, do you want to come in on anything? Were you okay? You're okay, brilliant. The only one, have I got anything for you, Tracy? Yeah, actually, yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hugo.
Sorry, thank you, Chair.
Brilliant.
Yes, it was quite a straightforward question, really. On page 38, it shows about the Rideau accidents, and whilst there's only been one in this quarter, there have been 8 in total. And I was just wondering, are there any trends amongst those 8? Anything we can learn from that?
So in terms of the Rideau accidents, we always make sure that we get a full accident investigation report done, which the health and safety team's involved in, just so we can keep on top of any particular trends or any areas which we need to strengthen. From the 8 reported during the year, I wouldn't say there was a particular trend to them. They were genuine accidents, but we will always engage very, very closely with the services to try and minimise the risk going forward.
Thank you, Tracy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Hugo. I can't see any questions, Tracy, so do you want to take us on from page 41 onwards?
Thank you, Chair. So page 41 through to 55 of your pack provides a summary of all the internal audit work completed in Q4. Overall, it's a really positive position, lots of adequates in there and good assurance statements as well. So the control environment continues to work adequately. The one area where we did have some concerns and gave inadequate assurance for part of the audit was in relation to the household waste recycling centre. We've been working closely with the management team down there. There's a new manager in the service and they are proactively addressing those recommendations. So that position should be much improved going forward. And then from page 56 onwards in the pack, it's the standard management information that we ordinarily provide. So progress in terms of priority 1 recommendations and how they're being implemented. Any covert surveillance which we've undertaken, and also the insurance claims performance.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. Do we have any questions for Tracy in the second half of the report? Brilliant. Jill, if you could.
Tracy, can I just take you back to the fraud awareness training? I noticed that the children's services and communications and regeneration, that their figures are less than the other directorates. So question is, why would that be? And is there an action plan to try and get them up to what I think is 100% is your requirement, isn't it?
It is, thank you. So every quarter when we produce the statistics, I send out a list to the relevant chief officers outlining those staff who haven't completed the training yet. I must say, whilst those 2 directorates are still lower than the other areas, there has been significant improvement over the last quarter. So it's very much work in progress, but I think it's fair to say that both areas are trying very hard to improve the figures, and we should get to 100% over the coming months.
That's good to hear. And a slightly, well, a very different subject now. Going on to page 44, there's some information, this is about children's services, and the review was on school meals. And you talk about public health engaging with schools in relation to food standards. Have we got any sort of deadline for when that will occur about that engagement? Because, you know, there has been a lot of information, hasn't there, in the media about the need to have really good school meals, good standard of school meals. So could you just elaborate a little bit more on that for me, please?
Of course, absolutely. So this is work that was started by Public Health pre-pandemic, actually. So there's already been an awful lot of work done on this. And what we find is the schools that use the council's in-house catering provision do meet the school standards, but that's not necessarily the same where other providers are used. That work has paused due to how busy Public Health have been for the last 13 months. So we're hoping that in the new financial year, at the very latest, we should be able to pick that up again. And Liz, I know it's not particularly your work area, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add from the public health perspective.
No, not particularly, though that is in my my part of the directorate. So I will remind the member of staff when she has a bit of free time to relook at it. But there is a big push nationally in terms of what's happened during the pandemic, children being off school, diet, nutrition, and school food and holiday hunger is all, you know, really big priorities. So absolutely key to get that work going again.
That's really good to hear. Thank you.
Chief, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
Jill. Yeah.
I'll just keep it brief in terms of the school meals side of it. Public health sets standards about what needs to be included within the school meals, and our catering service and the county council's catering service, which does provide to a couple of schools within Blackpool, more than meet that standard. And if you were to see their menus, you could see exactly why. You know, there's a limit to things like you can have chips once a week, this sort of stuff. And our provision during the period of lockdown when schools were closed, we made sure that all families who were on free school meals received a package of food which was still of the same standard in terms of fruit, vegetables and everything else. The private providers are a lot less likely to be of that standard, and it was particularly stark during the time they were providing food parcels to homes. One of the things which public health are keen to do is make sure that governors of schools are particularly aware of those standards, because what does happen when schools make decisions about using a catering provider for their meals, they get sold a price and a promise from a new provider, which then does not turn out to be quite as good as promised. So they make a decision based on price rather than based on the quality. And we're not convinced that all school governors are particularly well cited on those public health standards when they make those decisions. So it isn't necessarily just about we think our service is better than the private ones. It's to do with making sure that everybody meets those standards because they're the right standards.
And can the council put any sort of exert any pressure on them to do that? Because it's such an important area. You know, it sort of slips under the radar a bit, like you said, but very important for young children who are developing to have nutritious food.
We can be very clear with both governors and with parents and publicise what those standards are and what should be being provided. But it's the schools, and particularly when we're dealing with academies, we cannot enforce those standards or make them do it. But we can make sure that those standards are very clear, so parents ask questions and governors ask questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Do we have any other questions at all on this part of Tracy's report at all? Councillor Collett?
I just can't believe I've been denied my bi-monthly rant on people's trading figures. That's nice.
It shows it's been very effective, Councillor Collett. You've made a difference. Absolutely. We've got to find another area for you now to champion, because clearly it's very effective. Only just two very quick questions from me, Tracy, if I may. Page 46 on the household waste recycling centre. Obviously, there was one priority one. I know that will be addressed. It's indicated in the report. There is also, though, quite a large number of priority 2s and 3s. Do we know if that's on the work programme for the team to address? Is there a plan in place for that? You're muted, Tracy.
Apologies, a couple of IT issues there. I'm not sure. I can check later on the agenda to see whether it's included on the audit committee programme. If it's not, we can absolutely add that if that's an area you'd like to speak to the new management team.
It might be an opportunity as well to address other issues and so on, or not issues so much, but yeah, their current place in the world. The final question from me was on page 61, and I'll quickly go to that page, which is actually one of the insurance claims areas, Tracy, which was the cost of sensitive claims. Obviously, a big scary number in the most recent column there. Is that a trend, or is that something, and therefore something that as an audit committee that we need to start concentrating some time on, or is that particular just one-off issues?
In terms of the sensitive claims, I think one of the problems we've got is they can be very high value should the council not be successful in litigation. And they can it can take a long time for these sensitive claims to come through. So there's definitely an upward trend, but it relates very much to historical actions of the council, not current practice. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. I would say that sensitive claims has been for a while and continues to be one of the highest risk areas in terms of potential payouts from the council. And that's why we make sure that we report the information through to the corporate leadership team and the audit committee. So there's some transparency around that, and also we ensure that we've got appropriate self-insurance funds should all those claims come into fruition going forward.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And again, it's probably similar spirit that we just touched on in terms of the last answer. It might be looking at the future, something that we can pick up on in either the training program and so on, in terms of our approach to that particular item, being, as you said, some of the issues are legacy ones, but it's what I guess the audit committee's role is in how we address that particular area that supports the council. Do we have any other questions at all for Tracy on this item? Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Tracy, can I just take you back to the Household Waste Recycling Centre audit? The priority one, was that in relation to invoices for waste streams that generate income that haven't been raised consistently? Is that right? Is that what that one's about? Have you got any feeling for the level of income that might have been lost because those invoices have not been raised consistently?
I couldn't quote the figures off the top of my head, but it was quite recent. So I know that the service had been proactively retrospectively raising those invoices to get the income back, but I can certainly ask the question and follow up to audit committee in terms of the current levels. Okay,
that would be helpful, I think. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Excellent. So I don't see any other questions, so we move on to agenda item 6, which is the annual governance statements, contract management, procurement arrangements. I wrongly introduced you earlier, Steve, but I think I've got it right this time. Steve, this is you.
Thank you very much. This is an item that's actually appears on the Audit Committee Action Tracker request back in March 2020. And I don't know whether this originated because shortly before that time, we had an internal audit report on review of contract management and social value. But in the last 2 years of annual governance statements, these areas have featured. Back in 18-19, about strengthening contract management across the council, including improved measurement of social value, launch of an iPool course and exploration of software tools, and the subsequent year continued to explore procurement opportunities with local suppliers and look to provide training to local suppliers and elected members on procurement. Whilst we have a corporate procurement team and most certainly high value procurements are channeled through that, subsequent contract management is devolved to respective services. And we see the embedding of that culture of good contract management and adoption of the principles of good contract management, much as we do with risk management, business continuity planning, equality and diversity. So there is an onus on us at the centre to ensure that training does get out. And in the past, we have had face-to-face formal training undertaken by the likes of Zurich Insurance, for instance. And as you've seen in the report, we do have an iPool course, but only 32 candidates have undertaken that so far, and not necessarily the right candidates. Sometimes it's people who have an interest or capacity rather than the people who really need to understand that. And the last 12 months, as we've been discussing earlier, it's been a huge distraction and people have been redeployed elsewhere. So it's not a communication issue that we've not got that training out. It's just that people have just not had the capacity and time to do so. But going forward, we certainly shall. And notice on the members training, I think for next January 2022, which is 9 months away, there is some contract management training on there, and we will no doubt incorporate some elements of social value within that, which has come on leaps and bounds in the last 12 months since social value came into law in 2013, I think it was. It's been a steep learning curve, and we've worked very closely with other local authority partners, particularly the Association of Greater Manchester Authorities. And back in 2017, I think it was, that we introduced a significant score of 20% in all tenders in relation to social value. And it's been amazing the innovative ideas that have come back, some very recently actually, that bidders realise now that 20% is a significant score and can sway the awarding of a contract. And the benefits in terms of providing, for example, budgetary information, IT, support to schools and so on, use of modern apprentices, or any apprentices within contractor work, is really helping the local economy. And I think it's probably 18 months ago, we appointed a social value coordinator, Amy McDonnell, who is working between procurement and business support, Peter Legg's team, and developing measures and measures of performance. And within the new social value policy and updated supplier charter, we've got more tangible themes, outcomes and measures that we will incorporate within the corporate key performance indicators going forward. So it's an area where we're continuously developing and improving.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. A question just very quickly on this. You can see the huge amount of progress that's been made since 2018, 2019. It probably wouldn't recognise itself in many ways. And what would you suggest as an audit committee that we do with this item moving forwards? In terms of what's the best value of the audit committee in terms of as we come out of the pandemic and the recovery journey. Is there a particular way that we could be used to support this? Would you like it to come back in so many months' time, as in 12, 18 months, or what would you like us to do with it?
Well, it's a shame it's 9 months hence for your training, but I think during that time, much as you do with the fraud awareness training, to perhaps look at the take-up of that contract management training on IPOO. We can perhaps incorporate that within Tracy's quarterly risk services report.
Yeah.
From my perspective, areas like adults and children's commissioning, property services, contracting, those are the areas that I'd like to see greater take up.
Brilliant. That would be really useful, because when I looked at it, I thought it's a great piece of work, and I just feel that we could bring it to life, but for us to know exactly how to do that. So perhaps that's something, Tracy, you and me can have a conversation about, that how we can tie this together to support the work of Steve and the team and so on. Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. That was really helpful. Do we have any questions for Steve on this at all? Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Chair. I think you've answered most of this question, Steve, because it was what have you achieved so far and what you aim to achieve in the next 12 months. But I'll just add on to that a bit, if I may, about the apprenticeships. Has there been, due to the pandemic, has that number been lower, what has been taken on in the various departments? And do you intend to address that in the coming 12 months?
I'd say internally, quite the contrary, particularly with the Kickstart initiative. I think most services are looking to take on, at least one, if not two, such apprentices, and out there contractors been working throughout the year on and off, and been taking on themselves, and certainly measures of the larger contracts, the larger development work. We've got hard evidence to demonstrate that, and that's what we need to really capture in something that we can convey to members through the corporate performance management route.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Thank you. No further questions? Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Steve. That was really helpful. On to agenda item 7, which is the annual audit opinion. Tracy, would you like to provide us with a summary?
Thank you, Chair. So each year the head of audit needs to make an assessment of the council's control environment, and that's what this report sets out to do. Probably the most important part of the report is on page 73, where I've reached my opinion. I have felt, even given the challenging circumstances of the last 12 months, there has been enough assurance work undertaken for me to reach an opinion, so I haven't had to issue a limited scope. Overall, I've determined that the control environment is adequate. However, I have identified 3 areas, key risks, key opportunities, which we need to continue to focus on going forward. One being the large-scale regeneration, which is happening across the town. It's very exciting, but we just need to make sure that that's effectively project managed going forward. The financial position of the wholly owned companies and the impact that that could have on the sustainability of the council, and also the impact of COVID and the wider recovery and all the work that's underway and needs to continue to going forward to help the council. I'm not going to go through the remaining narrative of the report. That basically sets out the work that's been completed during the year, the additional pieces of work that's been undertaken by internal audit, those areas of planned audit work that haven't been undertaken, but will be picked up in 21-22. It also picks up on the audit advice and consultancy work that's been undertaken and lists the various corporate groups that we're involved in, which also gives us another form of assurance, along with the risk management groups and the good governance groups. I'll also draw the committee's attention to the covering report, page 68 of your pack, where I have selected a sample of internal audits, where priority 2 and priority 3 recommendations have been made for more detailed follow-up by the audit committee over the coming year. So that's very much for your approval on whether those are the areas you do want to focus, or if there's any changes that you want me to make to that proposed plan.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. You did very well. That was a big summary in about 5 minutes. Well done. Do we have any questions for Tracy at all on this section? Jill?
Thank you, Chair. Tracy, I have to commend yourself and the council or your team and the council for getting through this audit schedule, through this, I think you called it challenging circumstances. I think they certainly were challenging. I just ask you about the assurance levels though, on page 76. So we've got, I think, 5 at good, quite a few there at adequate. Has the council got an action plan to try to, as going forward, and let's hope we don't have challenging circumstances like we've had this year, next year, but to try and raise those levels of adequate up to good, so to try and push those boundaries a little bit more, because adequate is adequate, but adequate can easily slip down and become inadequate. So I think it's important all the time to keep trying to push so that you do get those assurances higher. So are you aware of an action plan, or is that not a fair question for you?
I wouldn't say that there's a corporate action plan for the council to address those issues, but through every audit report we do, where we give adequate assurance, we do make recommendations on how the controls can be further strengthened. And if services implement those recommendations, which they do through the follow-up process, that would help push those services up to good in terms of risk management.
So obviously, this is my first year on this committee. So are there more adequate assurances this year, have you found, because of the nature of the year? Or is this roughly what you'd expect to see from year to year? I'm just trying to get a handle on the impact of the COVID year.
Of course, it's roughly what we expect year on year, and I do have to say, given the challenges faced over the last 12 months, I'm really pleased with the level of adequate we've given, rather than having to give inadequate, and that reflects how services have balanced really well in terms of managing risk, whilst also spinning all the plates that they've had to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's just trying, as we're going forward, hopefully into better circumstances, to try and push those adequate a little bit further on into good. But thank you for that answer.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jill. Do we have any further questions for Tracy at all? Very briefly, Tracy, it follows on Jill's point. What would you say you as a team, the audit team, have learned most over those last 12 months?
I think what we've learned most of all, I mean, the biggest practical change was moving to virtual auditing, which was a challenge initially until we got used to the technology. But I think as an audit team, we've learned to take a more pragmatic approach to our audits. So we weren't looking for perfection. We just wanted to make sure that those key risks were effectively managed and that nothing slipped through the gaps with everything that's been happening over the past few months. So there's been much more focus on more moderate, high risk absolutely would report, much more focus on moderate risk rather than raising lots and lots of best practice recommendations in recognition of the pressure the services have been under. Going forward, we can absolutely start to reintegrate that best practice, again, those priority 3 recommendations more and more.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. I also noted your comments about the action plan on page 68 and the different dates and the work plan that you've put together for us. Are committee members okay with that plan of the different directorates and services to come before us? Yeah, there's a nice broad range there, Tracy, and you can already see how some of those will play themselves out in the world that we live within Blackpool over the next 12 months. So, yeah, I believe we're okay with that. And the only thing that I would like to do, Tracy, as I mentioned to the 2 officers earlier, is just to thank you as well. And if you could pass on behalf of the Audit Committee our gratitude and thanks for all the hard work that you've done throughout what was a very difficult time and it's sometimes quite a dark time. So on behalf of us all, a huge thank you for that. We are very grateful. If you could pass that forward to the team, that would be most appreciative of us. So don't believe we have to approve it. We're just asked to consider it, which I believe we have. So brilliant. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 8, which is the Quality Assurance Improvement Programme. Which of our brilliant officers is going to take us through this?
It's me again, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy.
So under the public sector internal audit standards, there's a requirement for all internal audit services to continue to strive for continual improvement within the service that they deliver. And there is a requirement for me to produce an annual quality assurance improvement programme, which is what I'm presenting for this year. I don't intend to go through it page by page. I'll just give a summary. So the report sets out the performance of the audit team during the past 12 months. It also sets out the performance management framework that we use within the team to ensure consistency of quality of the internal audit work that we deliver. It highlights service improvements we have made during the past 12 months. And it also identifies actions for continual improvement through the coming financial year. It's very much on a self-assessed basis. This is produced by myself and the team. But as I think I've mentioned to Audit Committee previously, we will be being externally assessed against the public sector internal audit standards in June of this year. And that's a requirement that we're assessed every 5 years. So, of course, that external assessment will also be coming to committee in due course.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. Do we have any questions for Tracy about this element of the report? No. Okay. In the external assessment in June, I know I was interviewed last time, Tracy. It might be worth just to extend that to some of the other committee members as well, rather than just the chair, because the chair will have one view and the committee members may have more of an independent view. So it might be worth, if possible, having that conversation with the assessors.
Of course, I'll do that for you, Chair.
Brilliant, brilliant, thank you. Right, are we happy to approve the Internal Audit Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme? Okay, show of hands, please. Yeah, brilliant, okay, thank you. To agenda item 9, the Code of Governance. Mark, you've been very, very patient there, and also very quiet, I noticed as well. So this is your big chance to impress the nation. I believe we're catching up Coronation Street in terms of our audience share.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just to again, it's similar to the item that Steve referred to earlier in terms of the contract management one. This is emanating from the action plan from the the annual governance statement, which was agreed at committee in November last year. And it's hopefully the contents of the code are familiar, but maybe the way that it's been pulled together and codified, to use that term, is what we've done in terms of creating this code of governance. So it was identified that we did have a mechanism in place to review governance when we did the annual governance statement, but we've never actually identified and put that down in terms of a local code. So this is what that is attempting to do. So it lists within the code itself the key principles of the framework that we use, and we use the Sit for Solace framework as members of the committee are aware. But what we've also done as well within the code is listed the responsibilities around governance and the monitoring and evaluation arrangements that we do have for governance within the council and primarily through this committee. Appended to the code is what we've termed a governance framework, and this is an outline of what we actually use within the annual governance statement. So we brought this through the good governance group that I chair on an officer basis, and through the audit committee the last few years. We have used these different thematic strands that are listed within there to actually undertake our evaluation of governance when we produce the AGS. So this is really hopefully bringing all that process together into a code. And what we've done in terms of the governance framework at the back is identify what we've called the supporting evidence for each of those strands, which is what we put in the annual governance statement last year. What we're suggesting, Chair, is that if committee are minded to agree to recommend this code to council, that actually that governance framework we sort of still see as an evolving piece of work and should be reviewed every year as part of the governance framework and added to and strengthened. And that would obviously start very shortly with the this year's review of the annual governance statement. So that's the background to the code itself and how and why it's been pulled together. What we'd also like committee to consider, Chair, is to give myself delegated powers after consultation with yourself in particular and the Chief Executive and Leader to produce an interim annual governance statement to accompany the draft accounts, which we need to have published by the 1st of August. Obviously, we will bring the final AGS back to committee after the summer recess as well. And we're also, Chair, if committee does support the principles behind this code of governance, we will bring a partnership governance framework back to the next meeting, again, which will support the key objectives and principles set out in this local code. That's a brief introduction from myself, Chair.
You did excellently. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that. Do we have any questions at all? Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, can I just ask you, how do you feel? It's really interesting that the way you've presented this. I was very interested in the framework and then the evidence. So how do you feel that this the Code of Governance can be used effectively to improve the annual governance statement? So what are we likely to see where we feel that this is an improvement?
I think the governance framework that we've got at the back, the different thematic strands have maybe not been as visible or as aware within audit committee and within other stakeholders that take part in the annual governance statement. So hopefully by having as a code of governance that would be part of the council's constitution, then members can be aware of these different strands of governance, and rather than just doing the review of the annual governance statements over a number of weeks in the summer, it helps members and officers as well to identify evidence and areas during the course of the year, but by being aware perhaps more astutely of the different thematic strands that there are there, rather than not referring to them as we haven't done previously until the actual time of the workshops and the review that we undertake.
Do you feel there's going to be a lot more structure to it then, rather than just a collection of words at a particular time of the year?
Absolutely. I think that structure's been there, but it's not been prominent for people to be aware of. So hopefully this will achieve that.
Thank you, Mark.
And to follow up on Jill's question, Mark, would you say the inevitable conclusion of this improved process would be an improved annual governance statement?
I would hope so, Chair. I think last year we brought in the supporting evidence as part of the final. We didn't include the supporting evidence in the interim annual governance statement, but we did include it in the final annual governance statement. We noted that that brought it more to life and was a document that was sitting on the council's website, but people could actually click and link into that supporting evidence as they were also published on the website. So hopefully this will again strengthen it even more than as an ongoing process than we did last year.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Certainly we can test it anyway against those controls. And in terms of the delegated powers that you've asked for, if I'm right, are you saying that there will then be an update provided back to the audit committee on progress? Did I understand that correctly, or am I misunderstood?
Chair, what we're asking is that the draft annual accounts need to be published by the 1st of August, so an interim AGS, right. A draft AGS, for perhaps to give it a better term, okay, would be in place at that point, which we did last year, but without any real sort of authority in a sense from the committee. But the final version of the annual governance statement would come to the September meeting of the committee.
Perfect. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense.
It gives us a bit more time to actually get a finalised version that is fit for purpose, but also allows us to publish the interim version to meet that requirement for the 1st of August.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to be really mean now. Nicola, I saw your face as Mark was explaining that, and there's a little bit of an expression, so I just wanted to check if you were comfortable with what you've heard there in the conversation.
You know, that's absolutely fine. There was nothing I was uncomfortable with. Sorry, I just.
Oh, good.
I don't know whether I was deliberate that I had an odd expression, but I mean, obviously, recognise all the deadlines and the fact that you've got the draft and then the final. Obviously, from our perspective, is absolutely fine.
That's great, brilliant. And I apologise for being mean. I didn't intend it to be if it came across. I just wanted to check that you were comfortable with what you
fine,
just said.
thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we've got two things to confirm or decide, team. The first is, are we happy to recommend just gone off, sorry, just bear with me. I better get my wording right. The Code of Governance, are we happy to recommend that to full council? So if you put your hands up if you're happy to recommend. Excellent. And the second part of that is, are we happy to delegate the creation of a, Mark, what do you describe it as again?
The interim governance annual governance statement.
Brilliant, thank you. Are we happy to delegate for that creation of that? Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much.
And also to bring back to the next meeting the partnership governance framework as well.
Okay, I believe the committee are so minded. Lovely. Thank you, Mark. That was excellent. Thank you very much. So moving on to, this is always the exciting item of the year. Agenda item 10, the Audit Committee Evaluation and Training Programme. I've got some ideas on this, which we'll have a very brief conversation about shortly. But Tracy, do you want to quickly take us through it?
Thank you, Chair. So on an annual basis, we undertake a self-evaluation with both members of the committee and officers who attend the committee. So thank you very much for everybody for your input into the self-assessment process. I don't propose to go through many of the detailed findings, but what the report hopes to highlight is areas of good practice for the committee and areas where we could potentially improve elements of the committee as part of the continual development process. I've also included the results from last time so we can see the direction of travel in terms of whether we continue to develop or whether there's any areas that we need to focus on more broadly. Based on that feedback and feedback from the committee throughout the year as well, I've also proposed the Audit Academy training programme. for the coming 12 months, where we've identified a number of topics, many of which came through the feedback as part of the self-evaluation. So there's two parts to the report. There's the self-evaluation itself and how the committee wants to take that forward in terms of work planning, and then there's the audit training where I'm seeking committee approval to roll that out.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. That was excellent. Do we have any thoughts, team, on the appraisal, as it basically is referring to ourselves? What do we think? Are we happy with what we've seen? Is there any areas that you feel we should be looking to address, or are we on the right path of travel? I'm looking for any hands here. Okay, Jill.
Just to say, I think the training, the Audit Academy training programme looks excellent, and I think it's one of the best that I've seen. To have that level of training for an audit committee is going to be really helpful, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jill. And you probably picked up on the reference to the fact that we've renamed the training programme the Audit Academy. The reason is it reflects Jill's comments there. What we've noticed is the level of training is of a really high standard, and we believe any elected member an independent member that goes through that journey will gain sufficient skills to allow them to be making some really good contributions to these meetings. And by branding it as the Audit Academy, we want to create this culture, which is what we set out about 6-7 years, Tracy, wasn't it, ago, which was to create this feeling that every elected member, every officer was their own auditor in effect, and we really inbred that into our DNA. And the idea as well is everyone that completes it, either remotely or in the actual each session, will after 12 months receive a certificate to say they've completed the courses available, and it'd be a really special dynamic contribution that everybody's making. So hence why we've called it the Audit Academy, and I believe we're on to something very, very special there in what it represents. The other areas I thought which were good were clearly, when you think back to where we started on with the work that the Audit Committee set about, the feedback from me from the officers I thought was good. Obviously that's something that we're still looking to address, and we'll probably try and work through some of the comments that have been made. One thing I was thinking we could do as well is potentially include if they don't do it already, I don't believe you do, but include the external auditors, for them to take part in the survey as well. And I believe that will be a really good addition to that feedback. So, but thank you everyone for contributing to that. It's a big part of how we feed into our training programme, and thank you as well personally over the last 12 months, what a year that has been. But I believe the committee has stood up to the challenge and supported the officers, and will continue to do so in the recovery journey for the council. So thank you from me. Final bit of that is we have to approve it. So are we happy to approve the evaluation and training programme? Okay, excellent. Thanks again, Tracy. That was an excellent piece of work. Thank you. Okay, final one here is agenda item 11, the Audit Committee Action Tracker. Are we comfortable with the current state of the tracker? Is there anything that's not there or we need to focus on? We're all comfortable with that? Okay, brilliant. And the final one is agenda item 12. This may be a committee room A or a town hall, full council area. We await to decide what the future will hold for us over the next 6 weeks or so. But are we happy to confirm 17th of June for our next meeting? Brilliant. Well done, everyone. That was a really good piece of work. We've managed to finish within 2 minutes of the 8 o'clock deadline, which I set for us. So well done. Well done. Stay